about trying to understand the process of transition and what's going on with us and with our congregations when we go through them. There's a guy named William Bridges. Isn't that a great name for a guy who wrote a book on transitions? Bridges? Yeah. Yeah, you can't get better than that. Let me get all these in front of us. That's it. I just need to do it behind my back. He says that in any transition that we go through, there is the old, there is the new, and then there is between. He calls it the neutral zone. And if there's any Star Trek fans in here, you're thinking Romulans, aren't you? But if there's no Star Trek fans, I'm going to keep moving on because the illustration doesn't work if you're not a Star Trek fan. Okay, I can't see anybody getting excited about Star Trek. Okay. Anyway, William Bridges says that between the old and the new, there is this transition. So let's name some of our common transitions. From childhood to adulthood. Do you remember a phase that you would never go back to between those two? Or if you could go back to, you'd be very selective about the date and time you would pick? Okay, what about divorce? You were married, now you're divorced. Along the way, you're somewhere between. Pastor, no pastor, new pastor. Virtually everything that we describe as a transition can have this movement to it. The old and the new and the in-between. If we're right in what I'm thinking about where we are post-COVID, we're in that period now. In fact, we are in probably one of the most rapidly changing periods of history ever. And this is just not making it up because we live here. There are places in history, at least Western history, there's places where the change left a group of, or a generation of people confused because they lived in that gap time between, I'm thinking of the Industrial Revolution. In the Industrial Revolution, there was a time we lived on the farm, and then before you knew it, we lived in cities and we worked in factories. But in between, there was that time, there was, in the modern period, the time we used horses and chariots, and within a couple of decades, we were in automobiles. I'm old enough that I can remember the first phone that we got. Most of you have grown up thinking you could always carry your phone with you. There is a list that's put out every year by, well, it was Belmont University, but it's another university, but it gives you characteristics of freshmen, college freshmen. And do you realize that now we're dealing with folks coming to college who've always had cell phones? Always. Yes. They've always had computers. What's the biggest change that you can name in your life from just technologically or anything else?
When I was in China, the cell phone that they have is big as this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a big antenna on it too. Wasn't
in the 80s.
Yeah, it wasn't very sexy either.
No.
It just looked like
So
a big
big.
walkie-talkie.
I think like flying.
Huh?
Flying is so common now. I mean, to get
Yeah,
on a
flying
plane.
has become.
Used to be you had to have lots of money to do.
Yeah,
it.
my grandparents used to fly back in the 60s and 70s, but it was like one special trip to California or something. But now flying is pretty frequent for lots of people. Standard way of commuting. Yeah.
I guess Wi-Fi or data.
Wi-Fi or data, and having it almost universally available now. Pretty different. Yeah. How about the AI behind our software that even puts ads on our Facebook page? It's kind of scary. Like, I've been thinking about buying a new bike. Boom, the ads start showing up on my phone. Like, how did that happen? Yeah, I didn't even have my phone with me when I said bike. How did it do that? No.
Well, Alexa and Google.
Yeah.
Or Siri. Yeah. They they observe your habit, and that's when they push some more of the ads.
Those of us that are getting older, we want to get to the place where we can retire and we don't have to keep upgrading. Because one thing that's a current part of our setting now is you have to always be learning or you'll be left behind. I think we live in truly, I think we live in some of the most stressful times, because how many of you have the experience that you really can't answer all the email that comes your way? Or worse yet, you can't remember how the message came to you. Did it come from Facebook Messenger? Did it come by chat? Did it come by email? Did it come by WhatsApp? You can't remember which way, huh?
Good thing.
Viber.
Yeah, all kinds of other things.
Type in their name to find where it is.
That's right, yeah. Global search on my phone just to find a message. Yeah.
And also this blockchain technology.
Yeah, you're totally into that. Yeah, you've got Bitcoin, that kind of stuff, or yeah. Do you guys want to hear an explanation of blockchain? They're not begging for it.
Just the transition from a gas type vehicle.
Oh yeah, we're in the midst of that right now.
Especially here,
Uh-huh.
the gasoline is really absurd.
Yeah, I was really quite fascinated at how many electric plug-ins there are here in BC now. Yeah. Yeah, and if you've got an electric car, you get to do the HOV lanes, right? The high occupancy.
Sometimes privileged parking in different spots.
Okay. If all of us are under that much change, did you have one? You look like you were just thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the blockchain explanation. So what's about it? Tell me more.
Give us a thumbnail.
I have no more time already. Just Google it.
Okay.
But there's all kinds of how much change can we actually endure before we finally decide we want off the merry-go-round? That is, how fast does it get to spin before it throws us off? Right now, people are living generally disoriented lives. This is where I think church is actually more important, because it can be a grounding place where at least some of the things we've always believed are true. Because it feels like the world is just spinning so fast. Well, anyway, I'm wondering if a lot of us find ourselves in the neutral zone more often than we think, not just in the typical times of transition.
It's like the history of the church, wherein like the transition of conservative to liberality.
Yeah.
And how are we going to do that? How are we going to place ourselves a church with the spinning fast transition of the world, right?
Yeah.
So shall we still stick on that conservative thing, or we need to have a bit of that one and pick all those to be more relevant now?
Yeah, I do think that we need some theological anchors that keep us to the solid stuff as stuff spins around us. For example, I can always put my faith in Jesus. While we're in changing times, Jesus is constant. So I think there's some things that we can really emphasize that will help us. But don't be surprised if folks are disoriented around you, because we are living in some really disoriented times. When I was a young person, I didn't know I had choice in gender, and our kids are being brought up now in a world where they're being told they do have choice. I don't want to get lost in the gender conversation, other than to say one of the changes of our times is that we presume we have choices where we didn't. I'm old enough now, when I remember we had 3 channels and we had 4 if the weather was really bad south of us. And now we've got the experience, and this is my experience, is I've got hundreds of channels to choose from on the cable television. And by the way, cable's almost passé, right? It's almost past. But how is it possible to have 100 channels and still not find something to watch? How's that even possible? We always had something to watch when we only had 3 choices. I wonder if it's because our expectations were different. Well, anyway, I want to show you that this rhythm, this thing is actually pretty common. It's actually here. Let me share with you. Let me give you one more word. Give you one more word. Walter Brueggemann is a guy who works with the Psalms, and he does a lot of studies in the Psalms, and he noticed that the Psalms came in kind of three different speeds. And if you'll notice it, it's kind of our three categories. There's Psalms that speak to the world as it should be. We're going to look at one of those tomorrow on Psalm 1. This is as the world should be.
Yeah.
Then there are Psalms that says the whole world is falling apart. And then there are Psalms that talk about coming into a new place. That is, it's not the old place, but it's a new place, and so it's kind of a reorientation. These categories are really useful for thinking about where you are in life. Are you in a place where life is doing pretty well? Are you in a place where life is out of order? Or are you coming into a new place where you're beginning to sense a new order? We are all navigating. We're in one of these phases at various places in our life. Notice how well this works with the old, neutral zone, and the new. One of the ways that you know you're in disorientation is you're having a hard time making life work. You're working hard, but it's not working. And you can't put your finger on it. That's the other thing about our times is you can't always put your finger on what exactly. One philosopher says that we lived in cross-press times. That is, we've got pressures on us coming from multiple places, but we don't really have a name for them. Right? So we're being pushed on our moral code. We're also being pushed on government regulations changing always, but we can feel this pressure, but we can't describe it. We can't put our finger on it. Those are the times I think we're actually living in, to be honest. So let me give you a little bit more. By the way, I want to show you that this is deeply rooted, since I'm speaking to Christians today. This is deeply rooted in our story. Have you heard this story before?
Yeah. Wilderness and promise, right?
Isn't that the same story we've been telling?
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Wilderness is useful language for describing where we might be. It's just not a fun place to be. And in this story, it lasted 40 years.
So that's the place.
So when you look at where we are in time, where you look, and by time I mean here experientially, what does it feel like? There was a time, I grew up in a time when going to church was considered culturally a good thing. I now live in a time where I'm not so sure folks in the larger world even consider it a good thing. In fact, lots of folks consider it an unnecessary thing. Am I telling the truth there? I don't know. Again, your world might be a little different than mine, so I'm allowing that differences do exist. But what about this one? This is the story that we need to tell a little bit more too. And I'll tell you what I mean by these things here. Come on, give it to me. This is essentially the Exodus story told at the other end of the Old Testament, and it deals with the fact that people were in the land, and then for 70 years they were taken to Babylon. They lived in Babylon for 70 years, and then they went back to the Promised Land. So good to meet you. So this too was one of those transitions. Let me bring it a little closer to home. This story is core to the gospel, actually. I'll tell you, let me get it out here.
Resurrection.
Resurrection is reorientation. It's a new beginning. So there was the life of Jesus, there was the death and burial, and then there's transition. But if you were with Jesus the night before he was placed on the cross, if you were a disciple, you didn't think this was going to end well. It was in the middle. By the way, let me do one more for you. It's actually the rhythm of our life, so we. Becoming a believer in Jesus is not just about making the right mental stuff. It's about getting our life reoriented, isn't it? All I wanted to show you with all these slides is that this kind of old, new, neutral ground is kind of pretty rhythmic to our basic. It's the story of our lives. Now, culturally and societally, we are living in a time that I think is leaving us in the neutral zone way too long. So let me just kind of ask an interesting question. Is COVID over? I saw some no's. Any yeses? We don't know for sure, do we? Pretty good sign that we're still in the middle. We're not in the new. If we were in the new, we'd be able to say, yeah, it's behind us. And when I say COVID, that's shorthand for all of the pressures that we've experienced over the last couple of years and the way it's changed our schedule. As we've tried to live up, at least at Alberta Bible College, we've tried to live within the whatever the province said do, we've tried to do. You know. By the way, we never went into the you had to be vaxxed in order to come to school. I think if I had a large student body, I might have had to do that, but because we were small, we never made it. We recommended it. I've been vaxxed 4 times, looking for my number 5. So that's where I am on the political scale of vaxxing and non-vaxxing. But we never wanted it to be a dividing line between who the good people were and who the bad people were. Never wanted that to be a line. And I think our churches did a pretty good job of navigating that. Although I don't know if it's true in your world, but in my world, there are folks who won't talk to each other after this. So it wasn't harmless, it did hurt. So do you find this kind of useful as a way of thinking about your own life? Are you oriented? That is, are you, life's okay? Are you, life doesn't feel okay and the new hasn't fully dawned yet? Or the new's here and I'm getting used to it?
At least we try.
Yeah, there's probably not a single answer actually. That it's just kind of a useful way of thinking about where am I in time. Thriving in Transition, the course that we teach at ABC as part of our full lineup of courses, is about helping students figuring out where they are relative to, and we use this as part of it. We do some other things too. I also wanted to tie this with ministerial transition too, because it's really kind of it's more of the same stuff. Oh, sorry, I've got more ministry transition stuff, which I'm going to move us. Oh, yeah, let's do some of this. I've got slides that. If you're a minister if you're a CEO moving into a business, this works as well. Just want to give you some quick guidelines on how to enter something well. Study the church. If you're a new member, study the church. Get to know who the church is, both its history and its doctrine, etc. Get to know it well. Get to know the minister and the family. That's on the church's part. Have explicit expectations. We were talking about that earlier, how important it is to have clean contracts that actually say, this is what this work involves and this is how much you get paid. You want to get rid of all ambiguities if possible. You can't get rid of all of them because we're humans. So, I love this quote. Sometimes folks move into new systems and they think they've been given a mandate to change the world. Rick Ashley, a friend of mine who's been in ministry for many years, he said, as you go into a new church setting, as a minister, be a priest for your people for 2 years before you become their prophets. Basically what he's saying, take care of them first before you think you can tell them what to do. Or, as I would say, earn the right to tell people stuff. Don't assume you have the right. Staying well, this again involves transition, but staying well is on the church's part, make sure you take care of, and again, this is true of a board if you've got a CEO in a nonprofit, take care of the minister and his family. Base, this is really a good point, whether you're dealing with a nonprofit leader or otherwise. Base your evaluation of the leadership of the individual on how well the organization is doing. Just because a person spends 40 hours in the office doesn't mean they did anything productive. You can't measure this by the hour. So how do you know if a leader is doing well? Their organization is prospering. Kind of makes sense? Because I've seen boards get lost in the functioning of ministers in terms of how many hours they were putting in or which people they were visiting and all of that. You can always complain about that kind of stuff, but how well is the congregation doing as a whole? And that's probably based on the influence of that individual that's serving in that particular role. It could also be indicative of how well the elders are doing too.
Yeah, because some ministers look at it as an employment. It's
Yeah, it's more than that. Yeah. In fact, folks that are in the Bible college business are kind of reminded, unless you're willing for this to be life, this may not be the job for you. So, and then have an evaluation process. This is something that folks tend to be really weak on. By the way, churches really need, I'll say it here, we can explore it sometime else, but elders need a regular evaluation process. I'll let you guys ponder that because elders are not usually eager to do this. But even internally, if there's a process to say, how are we doing and how do we know that we're doing? How do you know you're doing the job? How do you know you're doing well at the job? There's got to be some kind of an evaluation. All right. Let me quickly do this. What makes ministry so tough? By the way, this is true of nonprofits too. So we expect our leaders to walk on water. We do, don't we? Who can live under that kind of pressure? We expect our leaders, or sometimes our leaders have disastrous personal problems. Leaders are people too, right? If you're in a church for, say, 5 years, chances are you've got a different church than you started with. I don't know what migration patterns are looking like in the churches that you guys are a part of, but it's not unusual in Bow Valley Christian in Calgary. I can assure you that it's 5 years down the road, we've got pretty much a different church. It's changed that much in terms of people coming in and out. If you're in a major urban area like we are here, you're going to have lots of flux, lots of flow. Yeah. We've already talked about this one, electronic technology shaping preference. This, by the way, this list was created way before COVID. We had no idea what COVID was going to do in terms of the number of people that would choose to stay online. So people are more distracted. Again, this is a pre-COVID list, but it's true, isn't it? Why is ministry tough? Part of the reason is that church members come to, or let me do that. The word member is a tricky word in modern English. When we use the word member, we almost use it in the same way that American Express, the credit card, uses members. I'm a member because I have the card. It didn't cost me a whole lot to get the card, but because I'm a card member, I am a member. And so we use membership as being part of a club. The word member is actually body language from the first century that that it meant to be part of the body. A member of the body was a part of the body, and so to lose a member was amputation. If you lose your American Express card, you do not feel like an amputation. Losing a part of the body should feel like you've lost something. And so the language of member in the New Testament is body language. Literally, I mean body language. It's like losing a member. And so today, our members often come to us as if they're customers, not disciples.
So when you say consumer, uh, it uh, it's not on the spiritual side,
No, it's not.
but on the like a secular day-to-day activities that we go to office, we go to work, as if it's the same thing that we go also on Sundays,
That's
same
right.
as thing as that,
Yeah, yeah,
and there's nothing changed, just for the
yeah, yeah. A disciple understands that they're part of the body of believers because Jesus has made them part of that body. A consumer is coming there to get certain religious goods and services. So if I don't like the preaching, I go somewhere else next week. That totally messes with the notion of body because member ought to be like an amputation, but today it's again it's is it Walmart or is it church? And it's pretty much the same mentality there. You can also judge it based on what we consider important. Like if somebody's complaining that they didn't get their favorite song or the music was too loud, all of those things. Well, some of that stuff can be useful, but if they were complaining as a disciple, they would be probably more interested in what Jesus was speaking to them than to anybody else. Like instead of leaving, I didn't like the music. Oh, I heard Jesus tell me today in the sermon. See, two different processes, but suffocating expectations, we've talked about that. Decrease absolutes. This is one that I was just talking about a few moments ago. We live in a culture of shifting sand, so it's funny to me what used to be wrong that is not wrong today, but at the same time, being in a culture that will still say certain things are wrong, like for example, lying to your boss is still wrong, but other things aren't. I mean, it's a confusing world. If you don't have Jesus as a guide, you just have society as a guide. It's always shifting. Everything's always shifting. So most of the people in the world are living with less and less absolutes. I'll leave that one there. Money struggles, of course, can be, by the way, historically churches have played their workers poorly. It is time for us to get past the mentality that says because it's ministry, we can pay less. There's something terribly unholy about it. Now, we may not be able to pay top corporate dollars, but we don't have to pay the lowest dollar. So anyway, dwindling public confidence, least trusted individual in public society tends to be preachers are among them. We used to be respected at the highest level. So, dysfunctional people leaving dysfunction. So the list goes on why ministry could be tough. I don't need to unpack all of them. Leadership crisis, lonely in a crowd. If you do this too much, it just sounds whiny. So I don't want to sound whiny. I just want to say that when we've got people serving us in leading our nonprofits and leading churches, then we want to be conscious of the fact that there are some real challenges. It's harder to do ministry today than it was 10 years ago or even 25 years ago. It is harder. That's not saying the folks 10, 15 years ago didn't work hard. It's just saying we're living in some pretty interesting times. Leading well, inform the church, do it with grace, have an intentional exit process.